Welcome to the Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast, dedicated to exploring the interesting journeys of the people in the provincial construction industry. Presented by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association, produced by Gale Force Winds. Join us as we chat with the inspirational individuals that ensure the continued growth of the construction industry and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Well, welcome to another edition of the Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast, presented by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association and produced by Gale Force Winds. I'm Alan Dale. With me, as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
Well, I always love when you ask me that because I always tell you, oh, I'm doing great, but I am. I really am. And we have someone on today. Valerie, you are our first guest of 2022 that we're recording in 2022. So it's exciting to be back at it after having many recordings that we've been, posting. But right now, just looking forward to getting to know you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jerry. It's so much fun to be talking to people in the construction industry, to see what they're doing, to hear about their passions and the like. I like talking to people that build things, that are part of that process, that are contributing to our communities in such a fantastic and tangible way. So without further ado, Valerie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, guys. Happy to be here today. My name is Valerie Penny. I'm a project manager with RCS Construction. I'm originally from Bishop Falls, which is a small town in central Newfoundland. Grew up there my whole life before heading away to university.
So what in Bishop's Falls intrigued you about the construction industry? What were the big motivators back then growing up?
I didn't have your typical, this is what I want to do and this is my passion kind of moment. I actually went away for university my first year to Acadia, thinking that I wanted to be a pediatrician. My first biology test told me that I should probably consider my options. So back to the drawing board. So with a little bit of consultation, math kind of being my strong suit, talking to a few people within the university, a few friends who were in the industry, and kind of thought maybe engineering was something worth kind of looking into. So that's, I finished my year at Acadia. And then I transferred back to MUN the following year. And the reason I wanted to transfer back was for the co-op programs. I thought it was kind of a huge asset. So came back to MUN, was short a couple courses, a couple that didn't transfer. So had to do another year and then went into the engineering program the following year. It was an interesting experience. It was, you learned very quickly that you had to work together and as a team. And if you were going to try and do it on your own, then it probably wasn't going to work for you. So came really close with a few good friends pretty quickly. Ended up deciding to take the civil route after my first year. And we lucked out. We only had a class of 18 that year, which was really, really small. And believe it or not, we were almost 50-50 on males and females, which was also unheard of. So we had an amazing group, worked my way through, did my work terms, and honestly enjoyed the school. Did most of my work terms, did some government, some federal, some provincial, a few private, and was starting to think maybe engineering wasn't actually for me. And going into my last work term, I actually had put together my application to go continue on to get my education degree. So I did my last work term. It was with a general contractor. And I guess I could say I found my niche. I found what I was missing in the other ones. So had a work term with them, had two amazing mentors who kind of took me under their wing. And then going into my last year, they actually offered me a job for when I graduated. So I went back to my last term knowing that I had a position if I wanted. So tore up the application and decided that I could see myself doing the construction side of things. And here I am.
Valerie, wow, what you just described there, I'm sure there's thousands of people in university right now trying to figure out their path and wondering if they're going to if it's going to get sorted out and will they ever find their passion, and you found it, right? And it took time and you went through it, and those co-op programs have a way to open your eyes to different things, right? There's no doubt about it. They give you some experiential learning, and I loved hear you talking about the importance of working as a team, and then you pepper in there the importance of amazing mentorship as you went on. So your journey that you just described there, I bet you there's all kinds of people out there right now in the exact same boat and gaining inspiration from what you just talked about. That's fantastic stuff. Wouldn't you agree, Jerry?
Oh yeah, I really do. I do have one quick question, and it's for, I think, anyone who's considering the engineering program. Is the What's the difference between how many, like, engineering? There's civil, there's electrical. How many disciplines are there within it?
Mechanical, ocean, naval. I believe there's probably a biomedical or some division of right now. Things have changed a bit, but there's a few disciplines that you can choose from.
Right.
Okay, cool.
But
And
civil,
within those, then you can kind of veer a little bit different way on how it is you want to go. In civil, you can do structural compared to kind of roads. There's lots of options. Um, it's not just building construction. It's not just design. There's so many different avenues you can take. And I think that's one thing that no one, I won't say anyone, but one thing that wasn't talked about to me when I was in high school of, these
right.
are so many career paths it could take you.
Yeah. Valerie, I want to talk a little bit. I want to unpack a couple of things there. One is what an interesting thing. A small class size of 18 in your civil program, but really interesting that it was an equal mix of men and women because, of course, that is pretty much unheard of in engineering. So what was
It
that
is
like?
absolutely. It was interesting dynamic. I mean, when we started out that in our first common year, I mean, you're pretty much surrounded by guys, and you look around and you think, oh, that's going to be interesting type thing. You're kind of in the minority.
Right.
But whichever way, I don't remember what the numbers were as our class as an overall, but once we split off, it was interesting to come back that next year and see. I think we might have one or two extra guys, but for the most part, we held our own.
Yeah, for sure. And you talked about the importance of working together as a team.
Yeah.
Expand on that a little bit. Tell us the importance of that.
I'm sure there's many industries that are the same, but the engineering program, especially the first few years, are intense. They sit you down and they tell you, look to your left, look to your right. One of you may not be here. You're not going to make it type thing. And it's kind of accurate. It's challenging. I think there's certain semesters we did 7, maybe 8 courses. You have labs on top of that. It takes up a lot of time, and trying to do it all on your own. I learned because my first semester I kind of didn't know many people, a little shy and reserved, so kind of spent a lot of time just working through it on my own, and really struggled. And then started to meet people, and then we would get together in groups and we would study together instead of sitting at home at night. And would be long nights in the engineering cafeteria, and then so you come to work together, and you each draw from each other's weaknesses and strengths, and then you kind of you support each other to get through it, which is no different than really in the industry, because
Yeah.
I still do the same today. So
Yeah.
it sets you up for that.
Yeah, 100%. You quickly learn your strengths and weaknesses and who can help and where you can help and the like. That's fantastic. And almost to a person of people that we've spoken to in your industry, they talk about the importance of mentorship. And not only that, but the desire to mentors others. Tell us the importance of mentorship early in your career. You mentioned that you had a couple of them.
Oh, absolutely. Mentorship is huge. It can be a very intimidating career. It's fast paced, it's changing daily. And you kind of get thrown to the fire and you have to react quickly. And that can be really overwhelming. And I think if you don't have the right mentorship, then it could be easier for you to kind of step back and, question what you're doing, lack the confidence. So it's crucial to have those mentors there that want you to learn and to support you and help you learn, because there is so much to learn. So I was fortunate going into a male dominated industry. I had my first, I guess, mentor was a male, and just took me under his wing and supported me right up through. Along with, I also had a female coworker who I got to be known as her mini me because she basically taught me everything that she knew, and that's kind of where I am today. And now I have a new graduate working with us that we had hired through university, same type deal as me. So we're trying to pass all that on to her and pass on anything that I've learned and know. And I mean, I'm still learning, but and I still look to those mentors, and I've got some great mentors where I am now, and it's been a great.
Was
Yeah,
there
I've been
anyone in your family that had engineering background at all?
No, no one in my family. My brother is an engineer as well, but he's younger than me. But I know no one in my family. It
So
was
you broke ground for him then.
yeah. Yeah.
Valerie, that's a great journey and a great explanation of mentorship, and so interesting to see how willing you are to give back as well to the next group that are coming through. Tell us about what you're doing now in the moment. What exactly do you do with the company you're with?
So right now I do project management. So I'll backtrack a little bit. So when I started right out of university, I started as an estimator. Did that for solely probably for 3 or 4 years. And then we got really, really busy. And I remember one day I got called in and said, listen, I have 30 files. I can't deal with them all. I need some help. So they were divided between us. There was three of us, and we each took a couple little jobs. And for me, it was the little ones because it was going to be my first. So I started dabbling in a little bit of project management. And then for I guess the next 7 years, I probably did both. I would estimate the job and then manage it and kind of do the whole process. And then about 4.5 years ago, I guess the company that I had got hired with at a university closed down. And then I had to I guess I didn't have to decide, but I thought that was a good turning point in my career to make the decision which route I wanted to go, whether it was estimating or project management. I think it's very beneficial to kind of know both and be able to do both. But I decided that I wanted to do a little bit more of the project management and kind of steer away a little more from solely estimating. I do estimate sometimes now when need be. If we're busy and I need to step in, then I will. But my sole role here at RCS would be project management.
Well, I got to ask you, not knowing anything about your industry, or I'm learning as we do this podcast, estimating. Are you estimating the business side, or are you estimating what is it that encompasses? Because I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
So for when I started, it would be a pretty detailed takeoff. So we would get a set of drawings.
Yeah.
I would literally go through page by page, detail by detail. There's certain divisions that we wouldn't take off. Like I wouldn't do a full electrical mechanical takeoff because we would rely on subcontractors. And a lot of the work would be subcontracted out, but we would self-perform any foundation work, any blocking, any doors, any specialty installs. So that would have to be quantified,
Yeah.
to tell you exactly what's in there. And then you'd have to apply unit rates, unit labor rates to try and figure out what the cost is, because ultimately then I would submit a tender. This is what we would charge you. And then we would compete for those jobs.
I'm getting overwhelmed just listening to you because that's not my expertise.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of detail, but it also helped me, I think, become a better project manager because I knew
Yeah.
kind of every piece of it type thing.
Now, project management, I mean, it's complex. There's a lot of moving parts, right? I mean, and there's a lot of relationships that you have to manage through a project. Tell us a little bit about that.
It is complex and there's a lot of moving parts all the time. I seem to have gotten the kind of reputation as being, I guess, somewhat good at the live renos. So that's kind of been where most of my experiences come from. So they present some unique challenges in that the places are open and you have to work around kind of customers and the business and the off hours and that sort of thing. So yeah, it can be pretty dynamic. I mean, we're managing subcontractors. We have site supers on site. We have to coordinate their deliveries, their schedules, our schedules, work with the owner and what their requirements are and try to give them a project that's on time and on budget. So, and with in particular with the renos, you're going into a space that you don't necessarily always know what you're going to run into. So you present a lot of challenges and, trying to learn, figure out the changes as you go, because there's a lot of moving pieces. And not to say that the new builds they have their own level of complication and for different reasons type thing, but there's a lot of moving pieces that you have to kind of keep together.
I love the term live renos. I like Jerry. I had never heard that term before. So you're actually in there doing your project while the customer exists in the facility.
So I guess one of the biggest ones I've done, so I've done a lot of work at the Avalon Mall, spent about 3 years there, basically revamped the whole original mall. And so, I mean, as you know, the mall didn't close. I think we lost one day in the full 3 years. So, our crews would work mainly night shift, but then we would have to have it back to opening for the public in the morning. We do certain things in the daytime, but you had to make sure that everything kind of, was ready to go in the morning. And then that presented a different challenge because any issues that came up at night, when I'm sleeping, I wake up and I have, an inbox full because there's all kinds of things that you have to deal with. So it's really a different kind of project and brings that little extra of complexity to it. We did an expansion on the Avalon Mall where we put the new rec room. So we put the expansion on top of the mall while the mall was open. So, I mean, you can imagine the level of coordination and effort that would take to put a steel on top of an existing open mall that functions. So there's been some interesting times.
Yeah, that sounds really quite fascinating. So your industry it's really one that I find quite inviting to people that wish to join it. As we talked about earlier, mentorship and stuff, but there's just so many opportunities in the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association right now. Tell us a little bit about some of those opportunities.
So many opportunities right now, and it's so diverse. I think it's important not to look at it as one kind of opportunity because you can be, on site in the field. You can be the one that estimates it, and you can be the one that manages it. You can be, hands-on. You can be the superintendent that oversees and coordinates. There's just so many different areas. And if you have a passion at all for construction and the process and what it looks like, or even if you don't, I mean, here I am and I didn't.
Yeah.
But I've learned to have a passion for it. And, it's an amazing industry in that it's constantly changing. And that's kind of what drove it to me. All my work terms prior to, I didn't have a challenge every day. And I needed that where every day wasn't the same. So if you're the type that wants something, challenging, rewarding, to be able to drive down the road and say, I was involved in that, or I did that, and I know this, then, there's so many routes you can take and be a part of that.
It's fascinating listening to you talk. I had a question. When travel was a thing, which will be again, it must be interesting to travel with you. For some reason, it came to me as you're traveling, you're in Florida and you look at a building and you see a crane or something. Do you stop and then look at it? Is that something that you do? When you go on vacation, you're on vacation and you're not thinking about it. But I can only picture you like, oh man, look what they're doing there, right?
It's hard to disconnect when it's the world you live in. As much as you try and pretend to disconnect, you're always aware of what's happening around you, and you pay attention to, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I've never seen that done before, and I wonder what that is, and then that brings you to what's that product, and so it's something that you're always keen to.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
I haven't given a lot of thought, Alan, to this live, what you call it, live build,
Live rentals, yeah.
live renos. But the Avalon Mall with all the cars and just trying to coordinate, just getting people there must have been something else.
yeah. Uh,
It's interesting.
So, Valerie, you talk about great opportunities, lots of opportunities, a changing environment around you, an inviting industry, welcoming people to it, and certainly supporting them when they arrive. And it's rewarding. You talked about rewarding. I mean, these are good paying jobs. Am I right?
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so these are the type of jobs that you can raise families on and the like. I mean, these are fantastic jobs that'll allow people a great future with a lot of interesting opportunities all around. What do you see on the horizon for not only you but for your industry generally?
I think construction is one of those industries that'll always thrive and always grow, or at least I hope so. I think the pandemic has kind of spoke to that, in that, there's many industries that have shut down, many that have hit pause. Construction is one of those things that it really hasn't. I mean, it's slowed in kind of progress, I guess, in certain ways, and delivery of materials has been an issue, but it doesn't stop. And it's one of the first things that comes out when they're looking to kind of get the economy back going. So
Yeah.
that's where they spend money, because there's a real trickle effect from it. So I think it's a great industry. It's something that's never going away. So it's, I think a safe bet most times.
Right on. A safe bet. That's a great way to kind of describe things for sure. Valerie, now we always ask our guests to leave the audience with a piece of advice. There'll be many people that are looking at the construction industry as maybe they might find themselves a place in there, and looking at it and listening to folks like you talk about it. And you've had a very interesting journey. Bishops Falls, small stop in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, back to a fairly intense engineering program at MUN. You've been through co-ops, you've had lots of experience, lots of time as an estimator, and now the complexity of being a project manager with, as you self-described, a niche in live renos, which I think is fantastic. What would a piece of advice be that you might give somebody?
I would think it would be to, first off, to the females, don't be intimidated. There are, I mean, I'm sure if you talk to most females, there's always a story of, the old school kind of mentality, but I have a million better ones for the couple of those that I do have. So don't be intimidated by it. There's so many people out there who are ready to mentor you and support you. And then don't just look at the one avenue of it. If you are interested, talk to people, find out all the different opportunities that are out there, because there are a lot.
That's great. Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, right off the bat, you had my attention when you talked about teamwork, because I remember my own education and trying to do things on my own, and it didn't work. The only way it worked in the business program as well was to have teamwork, and that set me up well for the future. Valerie, I learned a lot from you today, and I appreciate you coming on with us. It's live renos. I won't look at things the same way in the future. Thanks.
Well, another great edition of the Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast, presented by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association and produced by Gale Force Winds. What an absolute pleasure it was to be in conversation with Valerie Penny. Valerie, you lead a wonderful life right now. You can feel the passion for what you do in your voice. Complex work, no doubt, but as you so eloquently put it at the end, yeah, there's opportunity there for lots of people, and don't shy away from it, because there's a great career to be had in that industry. So thank you very much for your time. And I'll leave the podcast with my own piece of advice. And that, quite frankly, is the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association industry generally needs more Valerie Penny. So thank you very much.
Doing great here this morning, Alan, and I'm looking forward to getting to know Ed LeGros. We've talked to lots of people in the industry of various stages of their careers. Ed is someone who I'm really interested in talking to. He's the past chair of the NLCA, and he has retired. So we're going to get some really interesting perspective today, I think.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to a fellow who's retired. He's been around the block a little bit. He knows the ins and outs of that association. I can tell you, Jerry, we've met some wonderful people in the Newfoundland and Labrador construction industry. Largely, there's a lot of really interesting things going on, and I'm certainly excited to get Ed's perspective on things. So, Ed, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Ed LeGros, and I presently reside in Holyrood with my wife Deborah of 44, heading into the 45th year. And I guess my bringing up was I was born in St. John's, and my education was in St. John's. We moved from St. John's to Calgaroos in 1961, which is today it's probably a 20-minute drive outside the city. Back then it was probably an hour and 20-minute drive. Mainly because my mother was from that area and my father worked with the DFO, and he was gone a lot for his research work out at sea. So I continued to have one sister, and she went to school, as we call it, up the shore here now. And I went 1 year, but I went back to St. John's again. I think mainly because that's where my buddies were too. That's where my hockey was too. And I finished my education back and forth like that in St. John's and doing some small jobs, starting off delivering like newspaper when I was 9, 10 years old, getting off the bus in the evening, go do my run and come home and get my supper, my homework, and back up in the morning. And just for the younger audience, there were no school buses. We did get on a yellow bus, but it was a local bus. And I walked with my school bag from the lower part of St. John's to the last going off, I guess, into Prince of Wales, which was in on Peyton Street, which is pretty next door to the university. And people might look at it now and say, that's a nice taxi run, but I ran with a school bag, a lunch bag, and a bag of hockey gear on my back. So it kind of kept me in shape back then anyway. And then I continued on. My dream, I guess, in the beginning was I was going to be a civil engineer, and I went to university to study commerce. And while I was going through university, gaining my education and paying my way through, people I was working with on the side had a home heating oil distributorship, and through some kind of a marriage dispute that dissolved, and I was shaking my head wondering, I got to get a job this summer somewhere else to make money to go to university. And at the time, the distributors, the home eating oil people at the time, they were Golden Eagle. They approached me and asked me if I was interested in taking over the business. And I said, well, I just drove the truck and delivered oil to the customers. Yeah, but you've got a good rapport with the customers, and we'd like you to consider it. I said, well, I've got enough in my bank account now for 2 semesters. Just about 2 semesters, and at the time I think it was like $529 or $549 a semester then for your 6-course load with your books, which was a good deal by the day's standards. Now you got to keep in mind this was 1972, or 1970, and I guess from there at Mushroom, then they said, well, we'll give you one of the older trucks, and you took that, and I ran that, and it was getting close to September, and they brought in a brand new truck and said, we'll finance that for you and help you with it. And talked it over with my father, and he said, well, the worst you can do is stay at a university for a year and stay at that. And of course, as they say, once I got hooked on that and working 7 days a week, second truck came into the picture, then some home heating oil service group came into the picture, and we're up now to 75, and they had a service station with a restaurant in the garage that was fairly new, had burnt down. They rebuilt it and asked me if I was interested in taking that on. So lo and behold, of course, I took that on, and I went from there, and I got that busy. It was up on the highway, and it was on a main, I guess, drag, you want to call it. And I ran it from 6 in the morning till 12 in the night. That was the operating hours, 7 days a week. And meanwhile, it was back in the days when there was a lot of accidents on the highways, and mostly, I guess, due to the highway conditions and probably drinking. So that progressed into another area where I got into tow service business, doing a lot of towing for the big grads in St. John's and all the RCMP scenes. And at the same time, I was delivering oil and fuel to the boats in Holyrood at the FBI plant. and they were having trouble getting trucks and trailers in there. So I said, well, this is an opportunity to buy a tractor and a trailer. So I bought a tractor, and another guy had one locally. So we bought a trailer between us. And before the summer was over, we had a couple of trailers each of our own. And that started off getting real big. So the product I was buying, I had a call it a non-Mac product, and I bought into Mac in 1980. Bought a highway tractor with another couple of new trailers, and I was that busy, and the highway looked like it was going through, so I could see a little bit in the on the horizon. This is probably not going to be a good deal. I'm going to get caught with a lot of inventory, a lot of investment into the building, and I decided to get out of it because I figured the dueling of the highway and splitting it was going to cause headaches. So I moved down to the transport side of it with another truck, and we were running fish into the U.S. and around the island and produce back out, and that got grown to the fact I had to go in to buy another new truck in '83. While I was negotiating, people at the Mac dealership, the general manager at the time, he came out and he said, "You sound like a guy that we'd like to have invest into our business here in Newfoundland and come to work with us." So 6 months later, I was a partial owner of Newfoundland Mac and Atmos Equipment, and I was in there working with drivers driving trucks. So it got to the point that was that busy, and I had an opportunity to sell out the trucks and make some money, plus sell out the oil trucks. And I decided at the time I'd do that because I had a young family at the time, and I settled down. Jump ahead then to 1989, and things were going along good, but the high interest rates come out, and that particular company that I was involved in was, I'm going to say, somewhere around 38, 39 years old at the time. And they switched banks, and of course, you know what happened, interest rates went up, they moved in, and of course, receivers moved in, and they kept me on the payroll for a year. Receivers did, looking after disposing of all assets at all locations. And then lo and behold, I ended up going to work with a Chrysler Dodge dealership that was involved with the Cummins side of it. And one of the former managers I had applied for a job and put my name down for a reference, and the human resource team that were looking for their manager contacted me as a reference, and he wanted to know what I was doing. You know, I had used these services before, and I told him, and he said, "How come you didn't apply for this job?" I said, "Well, I was kind of happy right where I'm too." He said, "Well, I think you should have a talk to us." So then the vice president of the distributorship for Cummins at the time came from Montreal. I met with him, and of course, as they say, the rest is history again. I ended up going to work with him for a year, running a branch for him, and the following year, then they offered me a position of vice president for Newfoundland Labrador, and I went on to be a director with him. And of course, through the years, we had to build up the sales side of it, whether it was the marine business, it was the highway business, and then the power generation. And I guess the combination of having my garage, having my own trucks on the highway, doing repairs for everybody at my garage, I got to know a lot of people in the construction industry, a lot of the big players, and as I always say, the Chess Pennies of the world. And the late Mr. Penny was a big entrepreneur in Newfoundland. Anybody that don't know of the Pennington Group never came to Newfoundland. Yeah. So I kind of had his backing, telling me that, you know, you're right suit fit for this. You looked after me when I was in business. Deliveries always on time. There's no need to worry about if the equipment was running, because we knew you had been there and everything was going. So I went on from there, and then Cummins wanted to get into the power generation business in Newfoundland in 1997. But the difference being is that all the other locations Cummins had power generation, and their power generation business was called Onan, and that was separated into another company. And Cummins were acquiring the stock of that through whatever means they were doing. And they decided then that they were going to do away or kind of put off to the side any separate Onan distributors, and they wanted them all in-house. So then I got, of course, at the factory, and they said, "We're going to train you. You're going to get us into the power generation business." And that's really where I started to get involved and get to know a lot of the guys on the construction, because road building and construction, called aggregates, is different than putting up, mud and stone and steel. They're a different group of people. But in Newfoundland, of course, you're pretty well the same people, because there's only so much industry. So, and everybody knew me from that. So then I went on from there, and I learned to trade, and then I hired salespeople, and I trained them and talk about things going 360. In the end, I was trying to train in another salesman to replace me. I guess that's how I built up the trust of the customers over the years, that if you wanted me, I was there, and they knew I was always going to be there. And, I opened the door and I closed the door. If the toilet plugged up, it was my problem. If the bank had a call, it was my problem. And joke around the office last 2 years was when I take the suit off from behind the door, I said, must be bankers or lawyers or the big guys are coming in town. So that's kind of how my life involved, I guess, looking after the customer and being there all the time to be dependable, and probably making a lot of personal life sacrifices at the time. So, and here I am now at retirement, and yes, it did take an awful adjustment. I was busy the first year. My father had passed away just before that in his late 80s, and I was executor of the will. Of course, I had to look after all that. That was my job, supposedly. My sister would say, well, you're the paperwork guy in this house, so you might as well do that, and I'll go along with whatever the flow is. And that kept me busy. And of course, customers still call me on my same telephone, which I kept basically because of a lot of people, a lot of friends, I guess, over the years. And that's what I found too. When you got customers that turn into being personal family friends, then that's where the strength of your business is too. And I don't know of anybody, and I'd be, I guess, highly disappointed if someone were to say that I'd never buy or I'd never deal with Ed the Grow again, because that was never the case. If somebody made a mistake, and I always said to our people, if you've done something, tell me up front. I don't want to go in a court discovery and hear it and then be embarrassed and be after spending all this money through the legal counsel. And in senior above me, a president's going to say, Ed, what are we doing in here anyway? We should have never been in here. And I wouldn't want to sit down in front of him and say, yes, sir, you're 100% right. So I always told him, if you made a mistake, let me know, we'll deal with it. And don't make the mistake again. If making a mistake again would be the last mistake. So that's kind of where I ended off doing. Now I'm retired. I'm trying to keep busy at my hunting camp and around motorhome and whenever I can. And I don't seem to have much time. I used to say to my father when he retired, I say, Skipper, what are you at all day? He said, well, you know what? I don't know. He said, you'll tell me the same thing down the road. I don't know where I found time to work.
So Ed, what a wonderful journey you just described that you've had. What a rewarding career, from entrepreneurship to working for people to helping other people build businesses. But you hit the nail right on the head at the end there, and it's all about trust and customer service and the things that you described, and how your employees and your coworkers, how you told them to be upfront and honest. These are all solid leadership skills that we see throughout the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association, and it's to be celebrated, the wonderful career you've had. There's a lot of people now, Ed, that are looking at career shifts and stuff as we come out of the pandemic. What would you say about the construction industry generally? Do you think there's opportunity for young people there today?
Oh, definitely. And what I say is interesting. I look back over my career and I say, you know what, Commerce, if I could have got to finish up the degree, probably would have been nice. But me sitting in an office all day long, that wouldn't have ever panned out. Yes, in an office, in a boardroom, sit down on a project management team, answer questions, but get out and kick around in the dirt, see what's going on. And once you do one or two projects with some of the real large contractors, you got no worries. If they got a subcontractor, in our case, which would have been electrical contractor was given a bit of advice up front. Here's one of the suppliers we want you to deal with, and here's the person we want you to deal with. And I think, when there's a lot to be said about that. And, and at the end of the day, there's times that everything didn't go hunky dory. But when the job was over, we all were friends. We shook hands, we walked away, and what's on the next job. And a lot of times we were doing the next job actually before the last one was finished. So, and people will look at it and say, well, it's all right for Ed LeGros. He's in the construction association. He knows everybody. That's why he's getting all the deals. That's partially correct, but treat the customer nice, get involved in associations. I got involved in the construction association on the board, at the board level. I was a member long before, but on the board level at 2008. And some of the guys used to torment me. He said, well, you're the longest old fart ever kicked around the board for 10 years plus. I said, well, you could have told me to leave before. And they said, no, you're going nowhere and we want you to hang around. But that's how you get, and you meet people, you get other people. And I used to look at, and if we needed a position filled for the following year and we didn't have a good candidate for that, I'd look at it and say, well, who am I dealing with that I'd like to have sat across the board table from me, giving us some support, and who's there that I don't really know or really need to get to know. And then you get involved in association. There's a couple of probably outings during the year where families are involved with you. And once they get in, the families get to know each other. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, I can't give the deal to them. I got to give it to Ed. And it's not Ed, but it could be given to anybody else. And it just becomes that closeness and the comfort level. I mean, what do you do when you go somewhere to buy something yourself? If somebody has treated you good before, whether it's a vehicle or a suit, and you know that everything was what you wanted, it fitted you, you were great, you were comfortable in it, and you walked in, and Alan, you'd walk in and say, Jerry, I need another suit just like the last one, only a different color this time. Or I need another new SUV, and you know what I want, and you know what I like, and get me one. And that's repeat business. Anybody can deal or sell to a customer first trip around. Anybody. But treat the customer right. That's it. You don't have to do nothing else after that. Customer will continuously come to you and will pay a premium at times, because the cheap price in a contract going in front is not always the best price. Because I had contractors say to me that, Ed, you're not the cheapest guy on the street, but at least if I give you a PO, I know that's the end of it. You're not nicking and diming me to debt and telling me, oh, this wasn't included, that wasn't included. I didn't read the last page, only read the front page, and everybody is in a hustle the last minute, throw it in, they flip it all up, they get the number, put it into their spreadsheet and go, and oh, I didn't realize I had to add that on extra. And I used to say to our guys, don't separate that out, please. It is part of the package. If you want to put it down and itemize, that's good. But that bottom line number better be the number that the contractor got to carry. Because if not, guess who's getting the phone call? Not you, it's me.
Yeah. And what you just described there is all about personal relationships and how vital that is in business. And you also spoke eloquently about the importance of an association and making those connections, staying in communication with one another. What we're finding, Ed, is that the construction industry in Newfoundland is, while there's competition there, they're very collaborative. They really do want to see people thrive and do well. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. And that's where to be. And I know from being in business over the years, back from the early 70s, that there's people that know me that I'm trying to figure out who they are. But you got to remember, when they walked into that business or dealt with that business, they knew who either owned it or ran it. And that's all they need to know. I'm looking out at an event, probably a conference at the NLCA, and it could be 400 plus people there. And I'm up at a podium and I'm speaking. You two guys are down in the background. I met one 8 years ago, one 12 years ago, and you come, that's great, Ed. And I'm like, yeah. But one of the things I was always, I'd say humble. I'd say, I recognize your face, but you're going to have to give me a name, because if you give me a group of people and introduce me, I'll say hello, hello, hello. I may not remember your name, but if I see you in an airport somewhere, or if I see you somewhere else, I'm going to go over and I'm going to say, I don't really know your name, but we know each other. And I learned that from some of the good business people, the older guys that moved down in St. John's. That here I was, a little young fella growing up in business. I'm saying in my late 20s and early 30s, and these guys came over and said hello. And I'll tell you what, when you're a young fella and some of the big guys around town walks over and says hello to you, and I always remember the day that they moved in on that Mac business. It was February 23rd, 1989. I had 3 phone calls that morning when the receivers let me in the building. And the 3 of them were from very prominent business people in Newfoundland. And I mean prominent. I call them, there are 3 to half a dozen shakers that were in Newfoundland. And they said, don't do nothing. Don't give in to nobody. Call me, come in, sit down. Let's see what we can do. And let's move on with the business here in Newfoundland. So when you get that, that kind of thing, instead of somebody that wants to put their head in a hole and say, well, I failed or I done something, but I learned a valuable lesson. And I say valuable lesson, there's nothing wrong. There's lots of partners around, and I'll always have a partner to business if, that's what it meant to be. But as my wife said, you better be controlling it. So if you ask me to go into business, you got no worries. I want 51%.
Right. Ed, a wonderful, wonderful conversation here today. And what a great perspective you have. And there's no doubt about it. You can tell you're just a genuine fella who people want to do. I want to do business with you, even though you're retired. Anyway, Ed, we always ask our guests to leave the audience with a piece of advice. You're a guy that's had a great path. What would a piece of advice be that you might give to somebody?
Get out and know your peers, treat your customers with respect, and don't talk down to people, and always get involved, whatever the industry you're in, get involved in that association and get to know your peers. It may take a few outings, a few conferences, but eventually when you're there, don't stand up in the corner by yourself. Go over and introduce yourself and get to know people, and give out probably thousands and thousands of business cards like I did over the years.
Jerry, your thoughts?
I have so many thoughts, but I'll just summarize. I was taking notes, Ed, as you were talking, because I love talking to someone with your depth of experience. First thing comes to mind is mentorship around the business that when you started in the home heating business, those people that took a chance on you, wonderful, just, set you on a path. Reliability. Obviously, Ed is incredibly reliable, and that's why you built your network. Hard work. The pace of your work, trust, customer service. And one thing I wrote down that I really like what you said is get out and kick around in the dirt. Basically your piece of advice, get out and know your peers, get out and kick around in the dirt. I mean, it's been a wonderful conversation with you. I think anyone who watches this will learn a great deal about what it takes to move forward despite setbacks. Anyway, just thanks for joining us, Ed.
No, glad to be of service.
Well, what another wonderful edition of the Newfoundland and Labrador, or Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast, brought to you by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association. Ed, it was such a privilege to talk to you today and hear about your journey. You're, I have to tell you, you're no stranger to hard work, and you can tell that you really value the personal relationship that you have with your customers and your peers, and that I think is part of your trajectory to success. So listen, on behalf of Gale Forest Winds, thanks very much for your time here today and your advice that you've given. And I always leave the podcast with my own piece of advice, and there's no doubt in my mind Newfoundland and Labrador needs more fellas like Ed LeGros. So thanks very much, Ed.
Thank you, guys.
I'm Alan Dale, and with me as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing well, Alan. Looking forward to, exploring the journey that Derek Brown has had in the construction industry.
100%, Jerry. I love talking to these guys in the construction industry. These guys see the results of their action every day. They're a big part of Newfoundland and Labrador. They're creating things every day right in front of us. It's such a pleasure to talk to them. Derek, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, my name is Derek Brown. I'm a project manager at the Cal Group Companies. Here it's a local, well, probably the largest construction company in Atlantic Canada, certainly. So I've been with Cal now, certainly 14 years. And it's I've seen a lot of amazing things created during that time, such growth within the company itself, but also with infrastructure projects, and many of them mega projects throughout my tenure here. It's really been fantastic. I don't know if I could have picked a better time to have entered the industry as a young professional to hit off such large scale projects and complex projects that are happening here in our backyard.
Derek, it all sounds exciting, and I can't wait to dive into it. Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Mount Pearl. I haven't migrated too far. I'm in Paradise now, and I've been here for probably 8 or 10 years now. So I've worked most of my life in Newfoundland, and I'm very fortunate for that because I have children, and I never wanted to be the guy on the road. I've heard lots of stories about certainly construction workers moving from coast to coast, pursuing opportunity, and I'm thankful that I am with a successful firm with a broad spectrum of service offerings that allow me to keep things fresh and local, so I can not only have a great career but also be a very active and engaged and present parent.
Yeah, good for you, Derek. And are you a MUN graduate, or where did you take your academic portion?
I am, yes. I completed my engineering degree at Memorial.
Yeah.
I did civil engineering, but the bulk of my professional career, for the most part, has been large scale electrical and mechanical projects.
Okay.
It seems, I guess, thinking back how I got involved in all of this, it seemed like I was always involved in some sort of construction, even at a young age,
Right.
whether it was a science project for school, because I always enjoyed entering those and winning. A little bit of competitive spirit, a bit of a science buff as well.
Yeah.
Building Legos as a kid or with my children now, I love just creating, even building tree houses and forts with my buddies in the woods behind my shed. I always liked having hammer and nails and saw and just tangible
Right.
tangible things to create and express yourself. I guess and then after I grew on from the tree forts, it was certainly helping my father do renovations to our family cabin or rental properties or just our personal homes. So
Yeah, Derek, the way you describe your desire to have your hands involved in things and building things, it'll be music to many people's ears that are listening into this as they look for opportunities in the construction industry in Newfoundland and Labrador, because there's so many people just like that. They want to get their hands into things, whether it be
Right.
agriculture, construction, or whatever. They like to see the results. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Construction is one of those industries that you could over the period of a couple months, you can really see the fruits of your labor coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's on the planning phase or certainly during project's execution. I think we've all driven past construction sites and see how quick building envelopes seem to go up after the foundations are poured and the steel starts going up. And even precast buildings, you see them, they can raise those in a day. Some
Yeah.
smaller buildings, of course, but it's really something to see, and you can see the fruits of your labor on a daily basis, which
Derek,
gives you a good feedback mechanism. So it really
yeah.
feels like you're contributing.
I want to go back to what you just said about children. You know, when I look, I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, and you watch them play and deal with Lego. And there's a program out there now called Minecraft. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Oh,
I've
very
always-
much. Yeah.
Yeah. What? It's interesting, you know, Alan, to encourage your children to engage in these types of activities. It's interesting to listen that they had an influence on you, Derek.
Yes, my two kids do play Minecraft. The older one who's 14, he's kind of moved away from it a little bit now, but my 12-year-old still, and the things that they create, it blows my mind how he is able, and over time his creations have clearly gotten much better. He can see things in his mind's eye and then recreate them in block form, whether it's one of his favorite cartoon characters or some form of elaborate architecture. I see little subtleties in his designs that you and I would incorporate in our house if we were sitting down with a design architect or builder.
Yeah.
And I don't know where he's getting all that from. Is it from YouTube or trial and error or just being observant? And for me, I'm blown away by the creativity and the flexibility of some of those games and platforms. They're much more than just a game.
So what's your feeling on that in terms of preparation for the industry that you're in?
In regards to
well, you know, as children play these games and design things, I get a sense that that is preparing them for a technological advancement in your industry. Would it be? Am I right in thinking that?
I would think so. It certainly trains your mind to think, problem solve, create things that are aesthetically pleasing to yourself, therefore most likely others. I think it gives people insights into like architecture, how things are built together. And many of these programs take physics into account, physics and spatial constraint into account. So children are learning complex things without even realizing it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to go back in time and see how many engineers and architects came through an appreciation for Lego and now Minecraft and things like that. Because you're right, it is the gamification of industries and a way of life and followings that people will call, whether it be in the construction association or otherwise. Derek, project manager with Cal Group's got to be tremendously complex job, a lot of moving parts there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I've had the great fortune of being exposed to many different projects. Some of the major projects I worked on in the last 14 years or so, I've worked on the White Rose electrical room. That was actually, when I was doing my engineering degree, I took a term off instead of doing a co-op placement. Well, I guess I did a co-op placement, but I entered it as an electrical apprentice. So I was actually on the tools in the White Rose electrical room working for a Cal subsidiary, but actually on the tools and not in the planning prep side like my project management and engineering world takes me in now. So that was just fantastic. I worked up in Voisey's Bay in a similar capacity because I swapped a traditional work term for a apprenticeship, and that was great that the university allowed me to do that, because there was no substitute for practical experience. I've known that over the years, and especially when you're a construction leader and you're trying to find either a more efficient or safer way to, or cost-effective way to do something. Most often it's the people that build it actually in the field that have that answer. You just need to work with them to fine-tune it into a viable option.
And Derek, that's a great conduit into my next question for you, which is, in many of our discussions with people in the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association industry, we find that there's this genuine desire to mentor people, to help people along, to see them be successful, whether it be through the co-op programs or just engineers out in the field working with technicians and vice versa. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as you may be aware, Memorial University has a very robust co-op program, certainly for their engineering and business. I can't speak to the rest of their programs, but certainly I'm very familiar with those, having mentored many engineering students. I've had the great pleasure of being able to be a leader to a lot of these students. And I have been on the receiving end of leadership as a student. I had 6 co-op work terms. And as I said, there's no there's no replacement for on-the-job experience. And I love how the co-op program weaves that in with your academics, because it's easy to go through a 4-year program and then leave that post secondary institution and not really know anything.
Right.
You read a lot, you learned a lot, you remembered a lot when you had to, but unless you're able to apply it as you go, me personally, I don't retain things as well unless you can practice what you learn and apply what you learn. And the co-op program breaks up your academic studies and gives you 3 to 4 months in a work situation, so that you can apply what you've learned. And that wasn't even in my, that wasn't only limited to my undergraduate degree. That certainly was relevant as I progressed and did other professional designations. I've got my professional engineer, PEng license, project management professional designation, and most recently completed an MBA. So you're always taking these little nuggets of learning and applying them. And what I love about learning too is what helps me learn even more than applying it myself is teaching or mentoring and supporting others, because it just solidifies your expertise. And then I find you get some cold eye review questions from people that really don't know anything about the subject and make you ponder and think about what you really know. And then you're like, well, maybe I don't know quite as much as I thought I did. And there's a new opportunity for learning.
Right. Derek, that was such an eloquent way to explain the importance of experiential learning and the like. I once had a conversation with one of the professors at MUN, and he told me that across North America, many engineers can graduate without ever having built anything. And he said that wasn't the case at MUN. He said engineers built, and they built early and often, and learned how to fail and learned how to redesign and the like. So a wonderful program that you went through. But Derek, really, your explanation of mentorship, it sounds so inviting. Is that your industry truly wants to see people come on board and learn from one another, learn from the senior people in the industry. There's room in there for everybody. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Every year that goes by, you see more and more minorities, whether it be women or other ethnicities or races, that are coming to our province, because we have a high quality engineering program that is certainly on the eastern side of Canada. In some cases, it's more affordable and logistically closer to a lot of these places that some of the foreign students are coming from, and they're bringing their own unique flavors and experiences to their cohort of students as they enter the field and their subsequent employers. So really, we're just creating a much more rich and diverse and competent workforce that I think that will help us sustain our place competitively as time progresses.
Yeah, 100%. It's wonderful to see new people coming in with new ideas, new perspectives, right? I often say that an engineering solution in Canada is much different than an engineering solution in Sri Lanka. The different resources, different needs, different and the like. So beautifully put. Derek, exciting times in your industry. Tell me what's on the horizon for you and the Cal Group right now.
Well, the Cal tend to be involved in some quite large projects. Certainly major infrastructure projects. Cal's been involved in a lot of P3s lately. The project that I just finished up was the Muncore Science Project. So I was project managing that one for 3.5 years, and it was a major mechanical installation. I believe one of my colleagues Patrick, who was on your podcast, talked about the complexity of the piping systems and things like that. So that was our core business during there, and I must say that there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of feet of pipe and over 1 million pounds of ductwork that went into that facility. It's truly state of the art. It was very challenging, very rewarding, and I'm proud as a peacock, to be honest with you, as we drive by, because I know how much local talent, whether it be from the design firms or the management firms, or of course the university itself or the local builders, that everybody put in to make that building a reality, because there's so much advanced equipment in that building, and that the need for collaboration was paramount. And it was very, very exciting project. Another one that I completed before that was the HVDC conversion stations at Soldiers Pond and Muskrat Falls and the AC substations. So I was responsible for 8 buildings over three job sites. And now that was a very, very hectic time in my career. That one finished up around 2017 for me, but just the scope of work and, having the opportunity to mentor students who joined our team throughout that process, and other trades persons, learning from the trades folks, because I had hundreds and hundreds of trades people working directly for me on those projects. It's just such a great thing to see all these people pulling together to a common goal and leaving this amazing piece of infrastructure when we walk out the gate, not only for the owner, but for the people of the province and our children and their children and children, because these are generational projects that is quite amazing to be part of.
Not many people can say they put their hands into those type projects, and as you describe it, there's so many people that were involved in it. So well done to you, Derek. You're a guy who's had a pretty interesting journey. There's no doubt about it. You're managing these big projects. You've had a wonderful academic journey, raising a family the whole time, doing it all right here in Newfoundland. What would a piece of advice be that you might leave us with?
If I could, I would say there'd be a few pieces of advice. One would be never stop learning. Clearly, education and academic learning has been a big part of my life, whether it been through pursuing degrees or professional designations. But chatting with people, being engaged with people, always asking questions, listening, those things will help you on your way. Getting a mentor keeping you on track, providing a safe environment of trust where you can bounce ideas off from one another. That is so critical. That is so critical, because we're stronger together than we are alone. And that would be some solid advice that I would give. And another one, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the NLCA. They provide such numerous resources, support functions, printing service, plans room, even the Commissioner of Oaths. They provide networking and collaboration opportunities for like-minded folks. The Education Center, where you can learn from other peers to refine your skills. It's just so invaluable. It helps raise the bar of safety, quality, and it helps provide a stable and consistent framework for our industry. So like I said, I had to give a shout out to the NLCA. I am a board member. They have certainly supported me along my journey and our company as we go through these uncertain times.
All right.
Yeah.
Derek, incredible words there for sure. Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, you know what, Derek? I don't know you, but as you talk about the core science building, I drive by that building frequently. Yeah. I can't help but be proud of you. And you filled me with pride. Yep. For what you and all of those people you described have put together in that state-of-the-art facility right here in Newfoundland. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, very, very much appreciated. Again, it's all a team. It's all a team game, and I think at peak, we probably had 230 of our own workforce that we were managing there with our subs, and probably peak for the project, they had over 400. So we certainly had a big chunk of that pie, but no one does it alone. And I was very fortunate to be with some fantastic engineers, tradespersons, support staff, designers, everybody. This is everyone is pulling on the same rope to pull that one across the finish line.
Well, another wonderful edition of the Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast, presented by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association and produced by Gale Force Winds. Derek, it was certainly wonderful to be in conversation with you, and I think there's no doubt about it that a rising tide floats all boats in your industry, and you guys want to see one another thrive in these uncertain times, and indeed you are doing that. It was an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you today, and I too like to leave the audience with my own piece of advice, and quite frankly, the construction industry in Newfoundland and Labrador needs more Derek Brown.
That's very kind of you to say. I will do my best to live up to it.
And welcome to another edition of the Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast, presented by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association and produced by Gale Force Winds. I'm Alan Dale. With me, as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
Doing well, Alan. As I always say, and it's authentic, I'm really, really interested in the journeys of people in various industries. The construction industry in particular really intrigues me because people build things. Carol, I'm looking forward to hearing your journey.
100%, Jerry. This is these folks are so exciting to talk to because you're right. They are building things that we can see, that we drive by every day, and it's so exciting to talk to people that were part of that. And one thing that we've come to know about this particular industry is how inviting that they are to new people joining their industry and their associations and growing them together. They truly get that a rising tide floats all boats. So without further ado, Carol, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, thank you guys for inviting me to join the podcast. My name is Carol Malloy. I am originally from a small community on the southern shore called St. Shots. When I grew up in St. Shots, the population was quite large, over 200 people. And today, unfortunately, with the industries that have changed throughout the years, population has certainly diminished, less than 60 people right now. For me, growing up in an outport, there was not a lot to look forward to there if we stayed. So for me, it was about getting out and getting engaged and getting an education and continuing on with the career choice that I had made. And looking back over the years, both my father and my grandfather were very influential in the roles that they played in the community. They were leaders. They liked to talk and represent the different groups. And from there, that's something I was always interested in doing and wanted to follow in their footprints. So today, I have conquered my Bachelor of Arts degree at Memorial University. I have also done an executive management diploma through Memorial University. I am a NCSO, which is the National Construction Safety Officer. I also have my professional Gold Seal certification, which is through the CCA. And from there, right now, I'm actually getting ready to challenge the disability manager exam, which is offered through NIDMAR. And unfortunately, due to COVID, last year it had been canceled and so on. So this year, I'm eagerly looking forward to accomplishing that.
Carol, quite a journey from the Southern Shore. Tell me about Dad and Granddad, and what were they involved in, and how did they spark your interest?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get many years with my grandfather. I was very young when he passed. Of course, I did hear many, many stories about him. He was involved in politics and, of course, in the fishing industry. My father was very much involved with the industry itself, and involved with the FFAW and speaking on behalf of the fisher persons in the area. So yeah, so they had a lot to say and were very passionate
Right.
about what they did. And certainly from there, after watching my father, express his concern for different things of the needs of those in that industry at that time, quite different than that of today. I always thought that would be something that I want to do. And, by educating and promoting people and things like that, that is part and parcel of what he did.
Right. It sounds like both quite great advocates in your part of Newfoundland and beyond. Indeed, you use the word, and I found it interesting. You say that you conquered your Bachelor of Arts degree. Explain that to me. Why did you choose that word?
Conquered. Well, coming from a small community at the age of 16 and going into an apartment and being on your own, as you can imagine, was quite the challenge. But also holding down 2 part-time jobs while I was in university. And of course, back then it was, there were so many different types of opportunities out there. And there were so many opportunities for young men and women to leave the island. And as soon as I finished my Bachelor of Arts, I headed to Iqaluit, and I resided there for a few years.
Oh, wow. Tell me about that experience.
Well, that was quite different and quite cold.
Yeah.
So I went to Iqaluit and to make quick money. And
Right.
It was a great opportunity to meet people from all over the country. And Iqaluit was the place to go. So between getting involved in the construction industry and the aviation industry up there as well, I worked as a teacher without a teacher's degree.
Yeah.
But I taught grade 6 and grade 7. And I also worked as senior finance officer with the government of Nunavut for a period of time. Wow. So as you can imagine, at a very young age, at 20, coming out of Memorial and heading to Iqaluit and having the opportunity to hold those jobs without all the expected training was a great opportunity to certainly be able to get a great deal of experience right across the board, from accounting to finance to aviation to construction, right on through. So it was a great experience, I have to say.
I spent some time in the Navy, Carol, and when you got thrust into these roles where you didn't quite know everything you should be doing, you're put in there when you were young, we call that drinking from a fire hose. Yeah. So it's just everything's coming at you fast. But you seem to kind of embrace that. I love how you talked about making your way into St. John's, an apartment, couple of jobs, going to university. And, there'd be a lot of people listening to this podcast that would be facing this decision right now, coming from not only small parts of Newfoundland, but around the world, and saying, can I do it? Can I go in and can I get this degree, or can I get this trades training? And what would your advice to them be?
Oh, just go for it. Yeah. It's a lot of dedication. It's a lot of hard work, but at the end of the day, the rewards are there. Looking back on the hours that I spent studying and then working, and one of my jobs was actually a night shift job. So, I'd work some nights 11 in the evening until 7 the following morning, and then go to school for 4 or 5 hours that day, and then go to my other job for a few hours. And that was all by bus.
Wow.
So we didn't have the luxury of having our own personal vehicles right away when we came out here.
Yeah.
Um, so, it was a lot of juggling, a lot of learning great time management skills. But heading to Iqaluit and having that experience of being able to do, accounting and finance and education and being able to teach and there's just so much opportunity out there for young men and women today.
Yeah.
The sky is the limit.
So, what are you doing in the moment, Carol? What do you do right now?
So right now, I have 18 years of experience as a safety professional. When I say safety professional, that includes safety, environmental, risk management, disability management, and not only that, but I'm also involved in quality. So I have 18 years experience. Right now, I work with a JSM Electrical in St. John's as their safety and quality manager. And I also serve on the board of directors with the NLCA. As part of that, I also sit on our committee of women in construction. I also serve on the board of directors with the NLCSA, and I'm also part of their governance committee. So I'm heavily involved with educating, promoting, and looking for strategies to get more women involved in the industry. Diversity is very important right across all businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's equally important in safety.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, I've seen a number of women, the gender gap has been there. It is still there. A number of women and their counterparts, their male counterparts, receive difference in pay
Mm-hmm.
with same qualifications. And, we need to bridge that gap.
Right.
We need to bridge the gap and get more women involved in the industry. And, that's it's an ongoing mission.
Right.
We're doing it all the time.
What I find interesting, Carol, is that you mention it, but the association and the industry largely is focused on it. They want to make the changes, right? And the very fact that you're saying that this is a concern and we need to address it, and there you find yourself squarely on the association that are going to make those changes, and you're contributing to the conversation. Tell me the importance of the associations to you.
Oh, absolutely. They're key in the industry. The amount of time that, we volunteer our time to sit on those boards.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of homework, but we are all like-minded individuals. We all have the same goal. We are always looking to do things better and find new ways. So, they're key to success in our industry.
Carol, you must go to bed at night. I don't know, although I don't know when you go to bed, but everything you described to me. But you must go to bed at night thinking, I'm making a difference. I really am. Whether on the safety side, whether on the association side, or on the welcoming women into your industry, you must go to bed feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yes, over the years, I've seen a number of things happen on different sites. And quite often women do struggle. One thing that I find very important and key to the success of women in our industry as safety professionals is mentorship. Mentorship is so important. And I've had the privilege to be able to mentor other women in the industry, as well as right across Canada. Wow. So for me, staying up to date on the different regulations and the standards, looking at the newest leadership strategies and things like that, really helps someone define who they are when they are in the field. Working in an office compared to in the field is quite different. Being able to make that change, even if it's to one person. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of men and women, both in the field and in the office, who have been very supportive. And you need to know how to deal with individuals.
Yeah.
Respect goes a long way. If you respect everyone that you're working with, they will respect you, no matter what your position is.
Great words for sure. We've never, before the podcast starts and stuff, we have a little conversation, obviously, but Jerry and I never ever mention the word mentorship in the conversation before we go live on the podcast. But everybody that we've talked to you in your industry uses that word, and it flips off their tongue so easy. And it's clear to Jerry and I that this is a very big part of the Newfoundland and Labrador construction industry largely, that you want to help other people succeed. So what an inviting place it must be for a young person or an underrepresented group to say, that's an industry that I know that if I go in there, that they're going to be there to help me. They want to see me succeed. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Having a mentor gives you the ability to have, structure and to measure what you're doing.
Yeah.
Really to be able to see what, the final product, if you will.
Right.
But it's a great way for people to get involved. And years ago, mentorship didn't really exist. It was there.
Yeah.
But today, providing that additional guidance and support makes a big difference to if an individual will stay in that chosen career at that point in time.
Yeah.
Safety for me, I believe, any individual who's getting into safety has to have good communication skills, because at the end of the day, communication is key. 100%. And, whether you're reading from the regulations or if you're offering support, being able to communicate effectively will certainly make a difference.
Oh, 100%. It doesn't matter what field of work we're in. If the communication chain breaks down, guaranteed there's going to be a problem. And
Yes.
in your world, when there's a problem, it's not good.
No. Never.
So, Carol, you've had a great journey from Southern Shore, Newfoundland, in through St. John's, all the way up to Iqaluit. Clearly, you're no stranger to working hard, and certainly you're a fan of lifelong learning. What would a piece of advice be that you might want to leave the audience?
Oh, the gender gap right there, as I mentioned before, it exists. And for me, looking at it, I want to see more women involved in the industry. It's a pleasure to walk onto a site and seeing women in trades, and it's welcoming. And I think the biggest thing will be to encourage, if you have female counterparts who are working in this field, to support and encourage them. There's opportunity for growth. Being able to achieve your certifications and your designations through the NLCSA, by achieving your gold seal through, working with the NLCA, and both are available to help at all times, and they offer the support as well. So reaching out and, providing the direction is key, for sure.
Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting, Carl, you said something. I want to see more women in the industry. And it's interesting. What I love about this format is that you are willing to come on and discuss some of these issues, and other women will see you. Seeing is something that I think is incredibly important, because you're obviously a role model. The other thing that I think, Alan, is common theme throughout all of our conversations is hard work. My God, Carl, you exemplify hard work. working nighttime and then studying during the day. There's no shortcut to anything. Even though you said, I wanted to make quick money in Iqaluit, you had to put an awful lot of effort in. So thanks again for being the face of females in the industry.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, another wonderful edition of the Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast presented by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association, and of course produced by Gale Force Winds. I love being in conversation with people that are doing lots of interesting and important work. Carol, the conversation here today was just lovely. You're such an inviting personality, and anybody that finds themselves mentored by somebody like you, I think, is on a trajectory for great success. I loved hearing the story coming out of the Southern Shore, Newfoundland. They must be very proud of you down there, of all the things that you've done, and we certainly appreciate you taking time out to tell your story today. And I will leave the audience with my own piece of advice, and quite frankly is, the construction industry in Newfoundland and Labrador needs more Carol Malloy.
Thank you for tuning in to the Building Newfoundland and Labrador podcast, presented by the Newfoundland and Labrador Construction Association, produced by Gale Force Winds.